All right, so our colleagues at TVJ, ready. Our colleagues at CVM, ready. Our colleagues at JIS and PBCJ and the others are ready. And I know the traffic is rough, but as usual, we stream. So I'm sure all media entities will be informed of this morning's proceedings. So then, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for attending this morning's post-cabinet media briefing. Thank you again for your patience in terms of all the notices we gave earlier in terms of times allotted this morning and certainly other issues. This morning, as usual, we have the Minister of Information, Youth and Education. I turn it around all the time nicely for him. Senator the Honorable Royal Reid, and the Minister without Portfolio in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Favour Williams. We, as usual, start with Minister Reid, who will give an update on Cabinet deliberations, and then Minister Williams will be followed talking a little bit about the economy. Minister Reid.
Thank you very much, Press Secretary, and good morning, everybody. Oh, sorry, can I turn off that AC?
Yes, I will.
All right, so good to be back this morning. I'm going to give you some update from the last Cabinet briefing that we had. Cabinet approved the following for tabling in Parliament. Firstly, an act to amend the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act 2018. This seeks to amend the original act to provide for the integration of the functions of the Management Authority into the ministry responsible for agriculture, in keeping with the government's thrust to rationalize public bodies. The objectives and purpose of the bill is to ensure the integration of activities under the Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture into the government's relevant agricultural and development policies and programs, cooperate with relevant international organizations in establishing and or strengthening the capabilities of developing countries with respect to sustainable use of plant genetic resources and in promoting and exchanging of plant genetic materials, manage the Plant Resources Fund, and establish and maintain a register of plant genetic resources. Approval was also given to the Bank of Jamaica Amendment Act 2018. This bill seeks to modernize the Bank of Jamaica and strengthen its governance structure. The amendments include provisions to allow for the adoption of full-fledged inflation targeting as a preferred framework for monetary policy making with adequate governance arrangements to ensure accountability. Establish the independence of the bank from undue external influence on its operational and policy decision-making, and establish a governance structure for the bank with collective decision-making bodies and effective board oversight. The following annual reports are tabled for, approved for tabling in the House of Parliament. Firstly, the annual report of the Universal Hospital of the West Indies 2014-2015 and 2015-2016, annual report of the Sugar Industrial Authority for crop year 2016-2017, Jamaica Business Development, JBDC, report of 2016-2017, the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, report ending 2016-2017, the Anti-Doping and the Subsidies Commission, 2014-2015, Jamaica International Free Zones Development Limited, 2016-2017. Cabinet also approved the award of several contracts. Firstly, the replacement of the synthetic running track at the National Stadium East. This contract was awarded to BSW of Germany in the sum of $71,500,000. And secondly, marketing and advertising services for tourism. That's the beautiful destinations has been approved for the award of a contract in a sum of $3,850,000 for a 3-year period between the period November 1, 2018 to October 2021. plus a monthly commission of 9.9% for media services paid monthly. This averages to a sum of $15 million per year for the 3-year contract. 4 bumper trucks for the Jamaica Fire Brigade services. This was awarded to J.R. Wellington Import-Export Corporation for an amount of $276,828,360 for the delivery of 4 pumper trucks for the Jamaica Fire Brigade Services multi-parish program. And fourthly, Civil Infrastructure Works Friendship Housing Development Phase 1 from St. Elizabeth, awarded to HDB Construction Limited, award contract of $323,848.77 for the provision of civil infrastructure works for the Friendship Housing Development and NHT project in St. Elizabeth. Also, contract for civil engineer, a team led by some consultants for Friendship Housing Development Phase 2 in St. Elizabeth. Cabinet approved the award of contract in a sum of $75,497,951.42 to Gentech Consultants Limited for the provision of a civil engineer-led team of consultants to design and monitor the construction of the Friendship Housing Development Phase 2 in St. Elizabeth. Also, the Integrated Infrastructure Project, Canaan Heights, Clarendon, Cabinet approved the award of contract to Alcar Construction and Haulage Limited for the execution of rehabilitative works under the Canaan Heights Integrated Infrastructure Project through the JSIF in the amount of $160,451,700.25. Chemical supply and services for refinery process and utilities at Petrojam Limited. Cabinet has approved the award of a contract to Suez Water Technologies and Solutions for the provision of chemical supplies and services for the refinery process and the utilities at Petrojam Limited for a 3-year period. The contract is in the sum of $1,786,312 inclusive of GCT. Also, the supply of medical gases to Cornwall Regional Health Authority, Industrial Gases Limited, has been approved for award of contract in the sum of $121,103,792 United States dollars and 52 cents. This is to supply medical gases to the Western Regional Health Authority for a 1-year period. And also the supply of viral load test reagents and supplies to the National Public Health Laboratory. Alaska Distributors Limited has been approved for the award of a contract to supply viral load test reagents and supplies to the National Public Health Laboratory for 1 year. The amount approved for this contract is $875,707.20. And firefighters' protective clothing, bunker gear, and self-contained breathing devices. Bell Safety Limited has been approved for award of contract in the sum of $1,270,204 United States dollars and 11 cents to supply firefighters' protective clothing and self-contained breathing apparatus to Jamaica Fire Brigade, and these include the following: 350 firefighters' protective clothing in the amount of US $833,037.33, and 99 self-contained breathing apparatus in the sum of US $437,165.78. And finally, in terms of contracts and this report, the deep energy retrofits for 3 government hospitals. Cabinet approved for the award of a contract to design, supply, install, commission, and maintain energy-efficient and renewable energy interventions that could guarantee reductions in electricity consumption at the Kingston Public, Victoria Jubilee, Mandeville, and the Falmouth hospitals. This is further to the conduct of an energy audit to allow for comparative review of the submissions. Consequently, Power Services Company Limited was approved for a contract in the sum of $5,358,382 US and 90 cents to undertake this project. And quickly, we had a very significant activity last week, November 5 to 9, the International Task Force on Teacher Education 2030, the 11th Policy Dialogue Forum. The International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030 met in Montego Bay last week, November 5 to 9, under the auspices of UNESCO and the Jamaica Teaching Council, an agency of the Ministry of Education, Youth, and Information. The focus of the conference was strengthening teacher education, a prerequisite for quality teaching, training, and learning. The final declaration from the forum, entitled Preparing Teachers for the Future We Want, had specific recommendations for global education meeting set for December 2018 in Brussels. These are expected to be included in the documents being prepared for the high-level political forum and to be discussed by other relevant bodies, including the Sustainable Development Goal 4 Steering Committee. Among the recommendations of the task force were that teacher education be provided by accredited institutions staffed with qualified teacher educators who have both theoretical and practical mastery of the teaching profession, be based on a well-defined professional competency profiles for teachers and teacher educators, be accessible and affordable and progressively free, draw from high-achieving secondary and tertiary graduates to ensure high quality of students, ensure diversity and equality among teacher educators, adequate to prepare teachers to teach basic and foundational skills, adequate to prepare teachers to teach skills, knowledge, and values relevant to the changing world, including digital technologies and artificial intelligence, relevant interpersonal skills, new methods of learning, and socio-emotional development. Be based on up-to-date and relevant teacher education curricula, drawing on research on topics on how students learn, use of technology for pedagogy, and contemporary classroom opportunities and challenges. Teacher education curricula should be aligned with national curricula. Train teachers to teach diverse learners based on principles of equality and inclusiveness. Equip teachers to teach skills for the future labor market and to teach values and skills that allow for the physical, spiritual, moral, and intellectual development of persons for the progress of society, the economy, and the environment. Allow for continuous professional development within the context of paid educational leave, and to allow for appropriate foreign exchanges and partnership with businesses to develop further skills, include mentoring, coaching, reflective practice, communities of practice, participation in research, and partnership with institutions of higher education as means of developing teachers. Furthermore, in view of the increasing mobility of teachers, teacher education and qualification systems should allow for cross-border mobility in the profession, governed by policies which ensure decent work for migrant workers and equitable management of teacher supply. Teaching should be an evidence-based practice. Teacher educators should be engaged in bridging research and practice by developing and testing new theories of learning, of teaching and learning. As a knowledge-based profession, teachers and trainers should be supported to continually update their knowledge base. Teacher education should empower teachers to use technology to support learning within a holistic and human-centered educational framework. TVET teachers should be of the same quality as other levels of education, with a focus on bridging learning with labor market needs, understanding the latest industrial developments, and teaching in both classroom and workplace settings. Early childhood education teachers should be trained to the same equivalent standards as other teachers, and viable pathways for untrained personnel towards training should be made available. Formative teacher evaluation plays an important role in improving teachers, and summative evaluations can play a role in holding them accountable to quality performance. To motivate and empower teachers, formative evaluation should be encouraged. And finally, above all, teacher education should allow teachers to prepare learners to critically and actively manage change in the future so they can shape a just and equitable future they want. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That was a mouthful, especially as it relates to the outcomes from the conference looking at teachers and teaching. Welcome to those who joined us a little late. We have a few ground rules this week, especially since we have to vacate this room particularly early today. Let me then now ask Minister Favor Williams to give her address.
Thank you, Press Secretary. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me acknowledge Senator the Honorable Royal Reid, members of the media. Since our last post-cabinet press briefing, Staten reported really strong news on the employment front. Approximately 1,338,200 persons are employed, resulting in an employment rate of 91.6% or an unemployment rate of 8.4%. This is excellent news, and for those persons seeking jobs with unemployment at a 50-year low, it should be a lot less stressful. The construction industry saw 9,400 additional jobs. Real estate, renting, and business activities saw an increase of 6,800, and health and social service work saw an increase as well of 5,200. Of note, there's one area that saw a decline, and that was private households with employed persons. That area of employment saw 5,200 persons shifted out of it, and I would say into other areas of employment. This is not surprising as new job opportunities come about. I would imagine that persons who are employed as household help will see these opportunities and move in that direction. The second item that I'll talk about is the fourth review that was recently completed. On November 5th, 2018, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, completed the fourth review of Jamaica's performance under the program supported by the standby arrangement. The summary was that implementation of the government's policy program remains strong. All quantitative performance criteria at the end of June were met. The central government's primary surplus exceeded the target by 13 billion or 0.7% of GDP due to buoyancy in tax revenues, in particular trade taxes, domestic SCT, and taxes on interest. Capital expenditure was about 13% above budget in June, an unusual occurrence in Jamaica where capital expenditure has typically been under executed. The higher infrastructure spending will help the wide infrastructure gap. The IMF continues. Non-borrowed reserves at the Bank of Jamaica exceeded the government's target by US $400 million, supported by robust tourism receipts. The IMF noted as well that GDP growth has been supported by robust mining and construction. It noted that the government's crime reduction efforts are paying off. Living standards are improving due to strong employment, and that inflation has been persistently low. The next item to note is that a new measure under this government-agreed SBA program with the IMF is to develop and submit to Parliament a national natural disaster risk financing policy for Jamaica by the end of June of next year. I'm pleased to report that the work has started in earnest. As you heard, a cabinet submission was approved by cabinet on November 5th for the establishment of a policy steering committee to oversee the development of the policy. A public forum on the fiscal risk of natural disasters was held on November 7th, which was well attended. Jamaicans have a significant part to play in building resilience in our physical infrastructure, and I'm talking our roads, or drain network system, or telecommunications network, or buildings, taking steps to mitigate natural disasters, as well as putting in place a national natural disaster risk financing policy for Jamaica so that in the aftermath of natural disasters, we can recover faster and build back better. We can only ensure this if we have a plan and if we have contingency budget, insurance, and other financial products, such as lines of credit, catastrophe financing in our portfolio of disaster risk financing products. Of note, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance will present on the progress in establishing a comprehensive financial plan at an international conference to be convened at the IMF on November 26, 2018. Additionally, I know the press and Jamaicans are aware that at a recent high-level meeting of 20 heads of government on September 20th of this year for the 73rd session of the United General Assembly in New York at the UN headquarters, the Secretary General of the United Nations invited Prime Minister Andrew Holness and President of France to lead a political initiative to mobilize US $100 billion climate financing to support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. The reality is Jamaica has no choice but to be at the forefront to provide leadership on the issues of climate change. Jamaica, by virtue of its geographic location in the Caribbean, is very exposed to natural disasters. Research has shown that since 1950, more than 12,000 natural disasters have registered globally. During that same period, the Caribbean has been hit by 324. And though it's a small number relative to the total, when you look at the dollar impact of this, the Caribbean has been it has impacted the Caribbean more. And just to give you the numbers, the cost, when you look at the cost over that period of time, it's some US $22 billion, about 38% of the global damage from natural disasters. So again, I repeat, Jamaica has no choice but to be at the forefront to promote leadership on issues of climate change. And finally, looking ahead in terms of information to expect, Statin will release inflation figures for the month of October on Thursday of next week. The PIOJ as well is scheduled to hold its press conference next Wednesday to give an update on GDP for the September quarter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Williams. So 2 dates to look forward to members of the media, November 21 and 22, when PIOJ and Statin certainly will give some more update on the activities in the economy. Thank you so much, Ministers Reid and Williams. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the media, it's your time to ask questions. Again, we ask you to bear in mind what we had said earlier concerning time management and, of course, where others need to be at a particular time. Any questions from members of the media? You kneel at the back. Could you await the mic and ask as succinctly as possible your question?
I know I came in a little bit late.
If you could identify yourself properly and your media entity.
Sorry, you're Neil Wood, TBC Radio. Minister Reid, I'm not sure if you gave any updates about the Road Traffic Act. Can you give me a summary as to what happened yesterday and what will happen next?
Well, let me just inform you, Neil. Yesterday, Parliament approved the amendments to the Road Traffic Act. You would remember that the first iteration of the bill went to the House of Representatives, sent to the Senate. The Senate approved with 106 amendments, sent back to the lower house. The lower house has now approved it. All right, any other questions? Herman, yes.
Herman Green, TVJ News. Minister Williams, regarding the economy, earlier this year, well, good news you've been giving us over the past few months. Earlier this year, the dollar was really sliding, running away in the wrong direction. Now it has improved significantly. Can you contrast then with now? What is the change? What has been implemented? What's making it move? And is it sustainable?
Thank you, Herman.
All right, thank you for the question. I'd love for us to get words like running away out of our vocabulary when it comes to the currency. We have indicated that the currency is going to appreciate and depreciate. Any day you wake up, it could move in 3 directions, right? It could appreciate, it could depreciate, or just stay stable for that day. So we have to get used to that. The foreign exchange market is just like any other market. Persons show up to the market to buy currency or sell currency. And depending on what happens that day, at the end of the day, the currency will have a value. So if more people show up to buy than are willing to sell, we're going to have a depreciation. If more people show up to sell than are willing to buy, we'll have an appreciation in the currency. And that's the market that we want to encourage, flexible exchange rate market. It will ensure that our Bank of Jamaica doesn't have to, pay as much as it has in the past or incur as much expense as in the past to ensure that we have healthy reserves because, there's a market there for the foreign exchange. In terms of where we are today versus, 2 or 3 weeks ago, you've asked what has changed. In my estimation, persons realize that their fears were not real. There was no concerted effort by the Bank of Jamaica or anyone to move the currency either way. And I think it's just that realization that's setting in that we're seeing. I mean, the fear has been subsiding, and people are realizing that on any day, if they need currency and they go to the market, they will get it. If they need to buy or sell, the market will be available to them.
Thank you, Minister. And Herman, it's really important to note that in keeping with international standards, if you pay attention to the international markets, this is really how they operate. And there is, again, no need for fear-mongering in the markets in Jamaica or in the economy in Jamaica. I think the Ministry of Finance and the government in particular have been at pains to ensure that the country sees as transparently as possible the footing that the country is being put on in terms of how strong the economy is, in terms of the job numbers, and certainly all the other indicators of growth. Are there any other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
Vanessa Silvera, JIS
Vanessa.
News. Hi.
Yes.
How will the government, Minister Reid, how will the government go about implementing the recommendations made earlier this month at the forum?
That's a teaching forum you're speaking about. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Minister?
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for your question. Well, these are recommendations, and they will be subject to a broader political policy review later on in December. But we're well on the way to look at some of these recommendations. Of course, this UNESCO forum was actually conducted in collaboration with the Jamaica Teaching Council. And when you look at what the Teaching Council bill seeks to achieve, it's quite consistent with some of these recommendations. The license and registration of teachers, providing for support in terms of their continued professional development, raising the status of teachers as a profession. So we will certainly, through the JTC, look very seriously as to how we can implement these recommendations once there is a general international sign-off at the next policy forum. But I'm saying that the policy forum is in December. We have to wait a final position because these are recommendations that need to be ratified. But the areas where we certainly can implement, some of them we're already implementing. And we look forward to the passage of the JTC bill, which will further cement some of these recommendations.
And Vanessa, please note what the minister had said, that that international conference will be had in Berlin in December, and then after that, of course, our own government will take from those final recommendations what can happen here. We have time for 2 more questions. William.
Well, I have 2 questions. Hi, morning.
No, you know, you're really trying hard, right, William? All right, let's go quickly.
Well, it's really
yes,
one for each.
Okay.
Hi, morning. William Mitchell, Nationwide News. All right, the first question for Minister Williams. Your counterpart, Minister Desmond McKenzie, you know, he's been saying that the government has paid its JPS arrears, but the figure he gave was just over $7 billion. But in a statement not long after, JPS said that figure was closer to $10 billion. So we just wanted some clarification on what exactly that figure is.
Yes.
That's one. That's for Minister Williams.
Yes.
And for Minister Reid, we just like reaction to news that a 3rd student from the crash in St. James yesterday passed away overnight while being treated in hospital. So we just want a reaction to that, and you know, broader reaction to the mayhem that's occurring on our roadways.
All right, you've touched a very, very important and sensitive issue concerning that, and I'm sure Minister Reid will respond. I have a few things to say, and then let's ask Mr. Williams first, though.
Just for a point of clarification, on the JPS comment, you said it was what? That they're owed. Okay. Yeah. Well, the 7.1 billion had to deal with a part of the arrears and to keep current going forward. So in the next fiscal year, you know, there will be additional provision to deal with arrears.
Thank you very much, Press Secretary and William, for that question. First of all, on behalf of the Prime Minister and government of Jamaica, we extend our sincere condolences to the victims of the crash, and certainly hearing the death of another student as a result of that accident certainly pained my heart and the government. We certainly, and it's so fortuitous that we have just passed the Road Traffic Act yesterday, and it certainly was against the background of us trying to, as a nation, bring greater discipline to how we use the roadways. So I'm using this occasion to lament the extent to which some of our taxi drivers and our public passenger operators operate, and private operators, that we have to be very responsible. We have precious lives, our own lives and the lives of children and other persons that we are carrying. If we all be very disciplined, we organize ourselves properly so we don't have to be speeding, so we manage our time, so we start out early so we can get to our destinations on a timely basis. I think that will help. And we're going to appeal to the police to be out there as they have been doing. Peace Step is out there as well to invigilate against this so that there's strong public order and compliance. And again, condolences to the families, to the student body, and all the friends and relatives of the deceased.
You know, William, the truth is these kinds of accidents are avoidable. And earlier this month, the Prime Minister, who is the chairman of the National Road Safety Council, actually had a council meeting, and a number of items were reiterated in terms of, you know, how the council should go about in terms of making sure that there is behavior change on our nation's roads. Certainly, over the past week or so, we've had some international assistance coming forward with partnership through the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, the National Road Safety Council, Jamaica National Foundation, and an international firm, FID, concerning looking at schools and how we can help children to take greater care on our nation's roads. A part of that project, too, will be training taxi operators in terms of how they can moderate their behavior on the nation's streets. And at that juncture, the Prime Minister also appealed to all Jamaicans to ensure that, especially as it comes to what we call the silly season, the Christmas season, that we take due care on our nation's road. And I can't say it enough. We really have to slow down and be more careful, be our brother's keeper. You know, sometimes you see some people cutting and zigzagging in the traffic, and it's unnecessary. And unnecessary behaviors like those, certainly through the amended Road Traffic Act, will be penalized. But it does take every single road user to be that more careful. So again, we extend our condolences and note that many of these accidents are avoidable if we only do our part to be more careful on the nation's streets. Final question, ladies and gentlemen. Final one. I saw Herman's hand, though, before you, Neil. I really did. My apologies. No camera. If only. Real quickly.
Minister Reid, just an update on the incident with the student at Veer Technical where she was beaten by a teacher with PVC pipe. We just want an update on the ministry's investigation into that, what's happening there, and how it ties into the government's overall attempt to ban corporal punishment.
No, sorry, let me just be very clear. It's not an attempt to ban corporal punishment. The Prime Minister has been very, very clear. Corporal punishment is no longer allowed in our schools. The minister can expound on it, but again, he used the opportunity at the opening of the Jamaica China Goodwill Infant School to reiterate that point. Corporal punishment in our schools, public or private, is not allowed. Minister, I'm passionate about that because I have a child who is in the system too, right? Minister, if you could. And that's our final question. We really have to go, ladies and gentlemen. Minister?
Thank you, Herman. As Naomi has said, we have a very clear policy on corporal punishment. However, this incident, I can't read the content, but I have before me a report coming from the principal on the matter. So we are going to do our own investigation, and then we form an opinion. But certainly there are disciplinary procedures involved in these matters, as well as there could be criminal charges if it is deemed to be assault against the person. And I want the public also to understand, because very often people are asked, what is the ministry going to do, right? Now, we cannot invigilate disciplinary action at the level of the ministry because teachers are actually employed to school boards. What I try to do is to make sure that we set the policies. I will signal to boards to make sure that the procedures are followed, because if an incident occurs, then I'm going to ensure that action is taken appropriately so, and a report be given to the ministry. Already we have started by asking the report from the principal. We'll follow up to make sure that the law and the procedure are followed. If the teacher, well, as I am seeing, the teacher is still there because, again, the process is principal can't suspend a teacher. So this is a matter that came out in the news. The principal would have to, which in her report, file the report to the board. The board would have to take the report, review, and make a determination if there is need for disciplinary actions. It's a kind of a little bit of several steps to be taken. So at the moment, there is no formal action taken against the teacher.
Thank you, Herman. Thank you, everybody from the media. Thank you, too, to the support staff from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and, of course, our ministers, Reid and Williams, who joined us this morning. Refreshments are outside. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and see you again for the next post-cabinet press briefing. Good morning.